What's up? Wow, aren't we lucky to have heard that original recording of a leather worker working away on a nice pair of leather trousers. Quite eye-opening. Hello and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. Today we will be looking at Sonnet 118. But first, we must see what's happening in the world of Shakespeare with some Shakespeare news. Going on to Google now. Shakespeare news is the search. Now this looks like quite an interesting one. Shakespeare's will that sparked family row found in archives. Wow, so a 17th century will that sparked a family row over William Shakespeare's grand Stratford-upon-Avon home has been found. The document was drawn up by Thomas Nash in 1642 and was discovered by Dr. Dan Gosling, a historian at the National Archives. And Gosling said he was confident no one had seen the will in 150 years as it was filed away in the late 19th century. And it showed that the execution of Shakespeare's will wasn't entirely smooth sailing, he says. So Nash was married to Shakespeare's granddaughter, Elizabeth Hall, and he left the property to his cousin Edward, despite having no right to do so. Bloody hell, Nash. That's not on. The house had already been left by Shakespeare to his eldest daughter, Susanna, who was alive and living there with Nash and Elizabeth. So Nash, knowing that Shakespeare had left the house to his eldest daughter, decided that he didn't want to give it to her. So when Nash died, Susanna and Elizabeth obtained a legal document confirming they still held Shakespeare's estates. Edward Nash hauled Elizabeth into court the following year, demanding she respect his deceased cousin's wishes. So that's another Nash, that's Edward Nash. So wow, the case landed in the Court of Chancery, where Elizabeth argued her late husband had no power to grant Shakespeare's home and mentioned her grandfather's bequest to her mother. And Elizabeth is believed to have settled the matter out of court and lived in the residence until her death in 1670. So Nash, who obviously married Shakespeare's, a relative of Shakespeare, he tried to leave the whole of Shakespeare's estate to his cousin. So when he died, it was like, here you go, mate. And Shakespeare's granddaughter was like, hold on a second, what's going on here? We have the right to the estate. You don't have the authority. God, Nash was, he must have liked his cousin, let's just say that. Trying to keep Shakespeare's estate in the family, in the Nash family. That is wild. Well, a good bit of Shakespeare news. Sorry, that took a little bit of time, but I think it was worth it. A lovely bit of drama. God, I wish Shakespeare was around now to write a play about it. Anyway, enough Shakespeare news. Let's have a listen to Sonnet 118, shall we? Sonnet 118. Like as to make our appetites more keen with eager compounds we our palate urge, as to prevent our maladies unseen we sicken to shun sickness when we purge. Even so, being full of your ne'er-cloying sweetness, to bitter sauces did I frame my feeding, and of sick welfare found a kind of meetness, to be diseased ere that there was true needing. Thus policy in love, to anticipate the ills that were not, grew to faults assured, and brought to medicine a healthful state, which, rank of goodness, would by ill be cured. But thence I learn, and find the lesson true, drugs poisoned him that so fell sick of you. So there we have it, Sonnet 118, and just by looking at it, you might be thinking, oh, he's just talking about illness and sickness and drugs and making your palate better and all that. But really, there's an underbelly to this sonnet, I do believe. In fact, I do declare. And the underbelly is, he's talking about how cheating is bad. Hey, there's an idea. Cheating on your lover, probably not a great thing to do. So the overall arch of the sonnet is going like, you know, I tried these other things, aka cheating, to sort of spice up the relationship, to sort of cure the relationship. But it turns out the relationship didn't need curing and I didn't need to cheat, and actually that was probably not a great thing to do. And that, for me, is the crux of Sonnet 118. I like this one. It's good. It's one sort of long metaphor for it, which I appreciate. Shakespeare, you know, he loves the metaphor. And I think this is a good one. And a cautionary tale. Cheating doesn't always spice up your relationship. You heard it here first from William Shakespeare. Turns out can be a bad thing, doesn't always help. I would say, I would assume that it would very rarely spice up your relationship, and in fact would probably tear your relationship to pieces. That's my hot take on it anyway. Right, let's break this bad boy down line by line and work out what the hell Shakespeare was going on about in Sonnet 118. So we start with, like as to make our appetites more keen with eager compounds, we our palate urge. So here he's saying, just like when we try to sharpen our appetites by eating strong and pungent mixtures to sort of excite our taste. I guess that was the thing that they did back in the day. They'd maybe try some pretty intense tasting concoctions in a way to maybe boost their palate, or they thought it was boosting your palate. It's a bit like a sort of amuse-bouche, isn't it? You know, it's going, hey, here's something to shock your palate into action, and then go taste some bread, and that might taste a bit different. So maybe that was the thing that they did back then, sort of try something crazy and then hope that everything after it tastes better. I mean, you would be trying everything, wouldn't you, to try and make food taste better, because back then it must have been bland as all hell. Then we continue with, as to prevent our maladies unseen, we sicken to shun sickness when we purge. So he's saying, you know, just like when we eat sort of strong tasting things to make our palate better, or make ourselves sick in order to prevent future sickness, which I guess is another thing that they did, which seems now quite insane. I don't know if we do that really anymore. I mean, I'm not like, oh, better make myself sick now so that I don't get a cold in a couple of weeks. So I'm just going to go make myself throw up. Hope you don't mind. Doesn't seem quite right, but I guess back in the day that felt like that was a strong theory. And I get it. Look, I'm not slagging them off. I'm not saying they weren't intelligent. I understand that school of thought. You're like, well, look, if I just make myself sick, then I purge the sickness. And purging, I believe, was a sort of an old technique. That's been used for years, hasn't it? Sort of you sort of purge yourself, and you're thinking you're getting rid of all of these toxins and diseases and whatnot, and then you sort of start fresh. Theory is potentially a bit off, and we're not sure about that now. But back then, that was a big thing to go off. So fair play to him. Even so, being full of your ne'er cloying sweetness, to bitter sauces did I frame my feeding. So here he's used those two analogies, and then he says, in the same way as those, because I was so full of your sweetness, which by the way wasn't cloying, it was actually a very nice sweetness. He makes that very clear. I turned to bitter and gross, if you will, sauces. And here, he's not just talking about sauces, not just talking about your tomato sauce, your HP sauce, your mayonnaise. He's talking about having an affair, I think. It's all an analogy, you see. He's saying bitter sauces. He's going, he's turning to the dark side, and he's cheating. So it's almost like he was having so much of a good thing, he thought, I might change my appetite and go and have an affair. See how that goes. Because maybe it was like the love that he was feeling was, it feels like he's saying the love that he was feeling was so intense, and it was actually, everything was so lovely that he felt he needed to go and do something really bad, which seems a little bit insane. I'd rather he just talk to his partner about it. Have a word with your partner. Don't go off and cheat instantly as your first thought. He continues with, and sick of welfare found a kind of meetness to be diseased ere that there was true needing. So he's using the same analogy, and he's saying, because I was sort of tired of being healthy, tired of this maybe healthy, great relationship that was so sweet, I thought it would be a good idea to make myself sick before there was any need to be. So it's the same thing. It's going like, I might in future, what is lovely and what's happening right now is so great, but in the future it might turn terrible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and do some bad things and get them done, get them out of the way. So that's why he cheated. He's explaining. He's going, this is why I did it, all right? It's not great, but this is why I did it. And to be honest, I don't think the explanation's that great. If I was hearing this from my lover, I'd go, what are you talking about? Are you talking about making yourself sick now so that you don't get sick later? What's going on? I think you just wanted to have a nice little sleep around with some other guys. Own up to it. Thus, policy in love, to anticipate the ills that were not, grew to faults assured. So with this strategy of love, which I used to try and anticipate problems that didn't exist, I became used to cheating on you. Nightmare. Never anticipate what is to come in your relationship. Just take it day by day. But I don't understand why he was going like, in the future. Maybe he's thinking, in the future, he's going to cheat on me. I think that might be it. I've got a breakthrough, everyone. Listen up. Here it is. You ready for the breakthrough? He's thinking, in the future, you're going to cheat on me. So what I'm going to do is get my cheating out now, so that's done, because you're going to hurt me later on. You're going to hurt me by cheating later on, so I'm going to cheat now. I think that's what he's saying here. Yes. And if that's not what he's saying, I like my interpretation of it. I think it makes sense. And brought to medicine a healthful state, which rank of goodness would by ill be cured. So I used medicine on a relationship that was already healthy, trying to cure something that was already good by adding something terrible, by adding something awful. So he was trying to make his great relationship better, but actually he made it way, way worse because he just slept around with other guys. It's not on. It's not on. And again, I like to think if I was receiving this, I'd go, well, I wasn't going to cheat on you, actually. So you've ruined it. And you've made me quite upset, actually, Shakespeare. Now we're on to the final couplet. But thence I learn, and find the lesson true. Drugs poison him that so fell sick of you. So here I think he's saying, but I learned, and what I learned is true, by the way. You had to make that clear. The drugs I used poisoned my healthy love for you. I guess there is another school of thought that is, drugs poison him that so fell sick of you. Sick of you. Obviously now we'd think of sick of you as annoyed by and sort of done with. I'm done with you. I'm sick of you. So he took the drugs because he was sick of his lover. But I don't think that really makes sense. And by drugs, I mean cheating, of course. But I don't think that really makes sense in the grand scheme of this sonnet. He seems like he's been saying, I still love you and I'm sorry, rather than going, oh, actually, by the way, I sort of cheated because I'm actually kind of sick of you and sick of our love. It doesn't seem quite right. But I think there probably are some people out there that think that is the meaning. But also, sick of you is a more modern term that wasn't used in that way back then, I don't think. So that is Sonnet 118. Now I think it's about time we put this to our story, don't you reckon? And if you remember last week, Shakespeare, he'd been doing this recital of a sonnet at his friend's wedding, and everyone was like, woohoo, that was great. And he got invited to the reception, to the after party, and he was having a great time. He was dancing and whatnot, but it made him think, oh, you know what, I need to mend my relationship with the Earl of Southampton, and the only way to do that is make it seem like all of the bad things that I've done were a test. And if I can explain that in a sonnet, then maybe he'll take me back because he passed the test. So he quickly writes Sonnet 117 and he goes, hey, I'm going to go read this to my lover. Walks off. Everyone's like, whoa, I want to hear a bit of Shakespeare, a bit of original Shakespeare. So the whole wedding party follow him. And they follow him all the way to the Earl of Southampton's house, where Shakespeare knocks on the door. And eventually the Earl of Southampton opens up and is a bit surprised, obviously, because Shakespeare's there with all these wedding guests. And Shakespeare says, I need to read you a sonnet. And the Earl of Southampton says, well, can we do this in private? And Shakespeare says, no, well, I've got a great audience here, so they all want to listen. And he eventually reads Sonnet 117. So let's see how that went down and how Sonnet 118 fits into all this. Shakespeare finishes reading Sonnet 117 to the Earl of Southampton. The Earl of Southampton takes a moment to absorb everything Shakespeare has just presented to him. That this was a whole test, and all of the bad things he did were tests for their relationship. And he turned to Shakespeare and said, you really are a piece of shit, aren't you? And everyone in the crowd goes, ooh dear, oh no. And Shakespeare says, sorry, I thought this was pretty clear that it was a test and we still love each other. The Earl of Southampton says, I don't know if I can get over this, Shakespeare. That's a horrible thing to do. Why would you test me? That's insane. And why would you bring all these people to my door? Everything you do is for the public, and I'm sick of it. I don't think we can be together anymore, Shakespeare. And Shakespeare says, please, it was all a test. I love you. And you passed. You got an A star. You did really well. The Earl of Southampton, with tears in his eyes, closes the door on Shakespeare and the wedding party. Shakespeare turns. Paul says, sorry, Shakespeare, mate. And the wedding party go, yeah, sorry, Shakespeare. Sorry. That was a really nice sonnet. I'm sad it didn't work. And Shakespeare says, thanks, everyone. It's okay. Remember, he's still in his straitjacket at this point. Paul says, I know I wasn't going to take that off you, but it doesn't seem like you're mad anymore. So I will take your straitjacket off, if that's all right. Shakespeare says, yeah, that'd be nice to get my arms back, actually. Thanks. And so Paul removes the straitjacket. The wedding party go back to cheering and whooping and enjoying themselves as Shakespeare trudges through the bleak London streets. He's been walking for a while and eventually he sees his old friend, the Nag's Head pub. And he thinks, oh, go on then, I'll drink myself into oblivion. Walks in, sits at the bar, has 5 or 6 pints of ale in quick succession, and turns to his right, and suddenly, next to him, is his frenemy, Ben Jonson. He hasn't seen him for a while. Oh, hello, Ben. Ben looks at Shakespeare and says, hello, Shakespeare. How are you? Shakespeare says, I've had better days. Ben Jonson says, me too. They get talking. Ben Jonson explains to Shakespeare that he and Christopher Marlowe have broken up and he's all alone. As he's explaining this to Shakespeare, Shakespeare sees a sort of beauty in his eyes and he remembers, Oh, Ben Jonson is a good-looking man. There's no denying it. A lovely head of hair, gorgeous little goatee, and a hell of a sense of fashion. They have a few more drinks, and they get closer to each other. They reminisce, and even talk about their old relationship. Eventually, the pub closes and they get kicked out onto the street. Shakespeare says, "Well, Ben, it's been lovely to chat to you again." Ben turns to Shakespeare and kisses him, fully on the lips. Shakespeare, slightly taken aback, pulls away, and then they kiss again, this time more passionately. And they're kissing up against the Nag's Head pub, lit by the moonlight. They break away from each other, and behind Ben Jonson, Shakespeare sees the Earl of Southampton, and his heart sinks. Earl, what are you doing here?" And the Earl says, "I thought I'd find you here, Shakespeare. I was thinking about your test, and I thought I might want to give you another chance, but it seems like you are still unfaithful, and you haven't changed." Shakespeare goes, "Oh, no, I have. It was just a thing that I did. I don't know what I was doing. It was alcohol." Ben Jonson goes, "Oh, cheers, thanks. Just the alcohol, was it? There's nothing between us." And Shakespeare says, "Well, no, I mean, you're good looking. I've always liked you. I've always said that. But, I love the Earl of Southampton. Oh, God, I've got myself into a hell of a situation again. I need to stop bloody cheating." And the Earl of Southampton and Ben Jonson look at each other and go, "Yes, you do need to stop cheating, Shakespeare." The Earl says, "Good luck with the rest of your life, Shakespeare," and wanders off into the night. Shakespeare says to Ben Jonson, "This can't happen again, all right? It was a mistake, I'm sorry." And he trudges off into the night, back home. He sits in front of the fire with his cat, Purge, on his lap. And he thinks the only way to mend this is to write a sonnet explaining why he cheats, finally telling the truth. He scrawls it down on a parchment of paper in front of the fire, wakes Purge from his lap, and says, "Purge, can you deliver this to the Earl of Southampton? I know I haven't asked you to do this for a while, but it's very important." Purge looks up at him, rolls his eyes, takes the letter in his mouth, and wanders off into the cold London streets. Eventually he arrives at the Earl of Southampton's house and pops the letter through the letterbox. The Earl of Southampton has been crying at the kitchen table. He wanders out into the hallway, picks up the letter, opens it, and solemnly reads Sonnet 118. Just like when we try to sharpen our appetites by eating strong and pungent mixtures to excite our taste, or make ourselves sick to avoid future illness. In the same way, because I was so full of your sweetness, I turned to more bitter and gross sources. And because I was tired of being so healthy, I thought it would be a good idea to make myself sick before there was any need to be. With this strategy of love, which I used to try and anticipate problems that didn't exist, I became used to cheating on you. I used medicine on a relationship that was already healthy, trying to cure something good by adding something terrible. But I learned, and what I learned is true. The drugs I used poisoned my healthy love for you. So there it is, Sonnet 118 and the story to go with it. Hopefully next week I will have a special guest. If there is no special guest next week, I did not manage to secure them. But if there is, then that's something to look forward to. Until then,